Saturday is almost upon us, and along with the South Africa-Ireland series, this one is also really massive. So I've praised England before, however, this is not a fan channel. Every team has their weaknesses and England are no exception. And that's what we're going to be focusing on in this video. We're going to look at what are some of the areas where the All Blacks can get into the game and where they can exploit England. The first area that I want to look at is the fact that England turn over the ball quite a bit. In the Six Nations, they turned the ball over an average of 14.6 times per game with a total of 73 turnovers. That is quite a bit higher than average, and against a team like New Zealand who are really known for having strong counterattacks, this could be a big problem for England. There could be a few reasons for this. I think it's mainly because they've added a bit more expansiveness to their game. However, if you look at their offload stat, they have the fewest amount of offloads in the Six Nations this year. So it could be that their pods are a little bit more spread out, which means that they'll frequently find their attackers being quite isolated. I think England's goal for this game is going to be to keep the game a bit more structured, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see their pods being positioned a bit more compactly. And they'll probably also try to really prioritize securing the ball first before taking more risks. Another thing to mention is that England aren't necessarily the most clinical of teams. In this year's Six Nations, they had 48 attacking 22-meter entries, which is on par with Ireland. However, from all those entries, they only scored 13 tries in the entire tournament, while Ireland scored 18. And given how good New Zealand's defense is, or at least was in the World Cup, England are going to have to be a lot more clinical and they have to take their chances better. Now, I'd love to hear your opinion on this, but I think the key for England is going to be to not overplay and overextend themselves in this game. I think risk management is going to be absolutely key, and I think an approach like they had in the semi-final against South Africa is actually pretty perfect. In that game, they really focused on making the game as messy as possible and as tight as possible, and I think that's going to be key in this New Zealand game. Because if they give New Zealand a lot of counter-attacking opportunities, I mean, we all know what New Zealand is known for. They can score from absolutely anywhere on the field. Another slight area of concern for England is their front row. Now, their front row isn't bad by any means, however, it's a bit inexperienced. They have Marler and they have Dan Cole there, but they also have Finn Baxter and they have Will Stewart. Finn Baxter will be coming off of the bench, so Borthwick has gone for a bit of a mix between experience and the new guys, but I still think it could be a little bit of a problem given how well New Zealand's front row did in the World Cup, specifically in that final against South Africa. Now let's move on to an area where I think England might have the biggest issue, and that is the fact that their rush defensive system, which Felix Jones has brought in, is still a work in progress. Because their outside defenders are so aggressive in shutting down the attack and really limiting the time their opponents has on the ball, it means that they can be a little bit exposed at the back, especially if their backfield defenders are not in sync with their frontline defenders. And we actually saw this being an issue against Japan, specifically in those early periods, and it was a big reason why Japan dominated in the early game. So this is an example of them really pushing up out of the line and then being exposed and leaving a lot of space at the back. This could be a problem against New Zealand because New Zealand actually have a lot of good kickers. Generally, we tend to think of New Zealand as this very attack-minded team, but specifically in the World Cup, the last time we saw them play, they were really good at the kicking game. They have a lot of naturally good kickers, and I don't think that's going to be any different under Razor. So it's really going to be very important for England to make sure that their defensive communication is on point. Their backfield and their frontline defenders need to be in sync so that there isn't a lot of space left behind. We could also see maybe their sweeper, which is usually the 9. It's this player behind the defensive line, really covering kicks, chip kicks. We could see them use this player a little bit more during the game. Or they might even not decide to really be aggressive in defense in this game. They might sort of choose that middle ground where they shoot up, but then they also transition into a drift. and then having one of their wingers really positioned a little bit more deep. Another interesting thing to mention is that England had the lowest tackle success rate in the entire Six Nations with 84.28%. Now, I do think this stat is a little bit skewed. Like I said, this defensive system really focuses on shutting down the attack, not necessarily on completing tackles. So because this is happening at such a high speed, your tacklers aren't necessarily going to make all of their tackles. And that's fine as long as your other defenders have enough time to plug the space. But it's going to be absolutely vital if New Zealand are threatening to break the line that you have to complete your tackles. If the English defenders slip tackles while the New Zealand attack is still deep, it's fine because there's going to be enough time to cover. However, if New Zealand are threatening to break the line, maybe even giving a skip pass over the top, if they've got a lot of attackers on the outside, it's going to be vital for England to make those tackles. Because if New Zealand do get into space, we all know what they can do. They are probably one of the best, if not the best teams while attacking in space. Another thing that I think is going to happen is that England are going to focus on a lot of double tackles to really prevent any offloads. Now, it could be that Scott Robertson doesn't really choose to play like this, but if you look at his Crusader teams, they've always been a little bit more risky in contact and giving those short offloads that really put players into space. So I think there might be a possibility that we see a few high shots during the game. I think that England, they're probably going to try to really prevent that extra offload by focusing on having players tackle low and tackling high at the same time. So let's hope that doesn't happen and we don't see a lot of yellow cards or even a red card. But I think that might be the defensive philosophy going into this game for them. Thank you so much for watching. I think this weekend is going to be a very good game. Cannot wait. If you haven't seen my other video about England where I praise the hell out of them, please go check that out. And I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.